Hello, I'm Andrea Paulton from Techstars, and today we're doing another founder series. Before we get started with what we're talking about today, I want to make sure that you understand that this Techstars founder series is a series. My co-host Dylan Scott and I interview founders, people that went through Techstars Accelerator, and we ask them questions that are super important for you if you're an entrepreneur. We talk to them about giving advice about their mental health, talking about how they got capital, talking to them about what their Techstars Accelerator experience was like, what happens next after you graduate. With some of our founders, we talked about how did you even get into Techstars. So be sure to subscribe to the Techstars YouTube channel and be sure to look at the Techstars Founder Series. I think we're at interview number 15 now, and we're going to continuously do that for you guys. If you are a Portco and you went through an accelerator, get with us. We'd love to interview you. And now we're going to get started with today's episode. We're talking to a company called Bloomfilter, and they went through a Techstars, the Chicago Accelerator in 2022. I believe it was October. And we talked with Andrew Wolfe and Erik Severinghaus. They're co-owners and CEOs of Bloomfilter. And what's really cool about them is that they work so well together. They actually have 4 people that are really leading Bloomfilter. And in our conversation today, we talk about something super exciting, capital. They raised a lot of money, so make sure you listen in. They also give advice on how to raise capital. And we also talk about mental health. Erik wrote a book on mental health. He had some amazing experiences and some negative experiences that he shares in the book. And so we're kind of covering all of it today. So please subscribe. Have a good time watching and learning from this powerhouse. And hopefully we'll see you at the next episode, which is going to be airing soon. Hello, Andrew and Erik. Thank you guys so much for being here. I want to hear a little bit more before we talk about anything else about your company, Bloomfilter. Tell me what Bloomfilter does and who it's for.
Awesome. So Bloomfilter in one sentence is process mining for the SDLC. What that means is we sit on top of your development systems like Jira, GitHub, Figma. We pull that data out, we apply our process mining engine to it, and we show you where you have inefficiencies in your process, how to improve your software development process, and ultimately answer 3 questions. What are you going to get? When are you going to get it? And how much is it going to cost you?
Nice. And so target audience is developers, enterprise, or who are you going after?
We're a B2B SaaS shop. We primarily sell to technology executives, think CIOs, CTOs, CPOs. And we slant towards our users being more the people that are responsible for the reporting and the process around how software development is done and executed within businesses.
So for every company, there's somebody who reports to the executive team and the board and answers those questions that Andrew laid out, right? That person whose responsibility it is to oversee software development is ultimately our customer. The size of the customer that we're selling to right now is typically mid-market into enterprise. So companies that have anywhere between about 30 to 300 engineers have been fantastic customers for us.
Nice, nice. And Andrew, when did you finish the Techstars Accelerator?
Yeah, our demo day was the first day of September of last year, so 2022. That's when we graduated. We did the illustrious demo day here in Chicago, 1871, and ultimately ended up getting a lot of interest in the company.
Yeah, and there's so much cool stuff going on. So I want to talk about some of that capital that I heard about that you guys are working on. But before we get there, I love your guys' story. And Erik, you've been with Techstars in multiple ways and have done so much. So can we start with you? Tell us a little bit about your history with Techstars. And then after that, I want to hear from both of you how you two met.
Yeah, absolutely. So I took a company through the first, when Accelerate Labs became Techstars Chicago. I took a company called Simple Relevance through that process about 10 years ago, and just had an absolutely fantastic time. Had an interesting journey with the company that I ended up chronicling along with a whole bunch of advice and counsel to entrepreneurs in a book called Scale Your Everest, which is really focused on how to build mental and emotional resilience for the founder's journey. And as a part of that, the managing directors of the Chicago organization have asked me to come every year and give a presentation around how to be mentally and emotionally resilient to the challenges of the entrepreneurial journey. And so I've stayed very involved with Techstars. I've mentored, I've invested in a number of the companies coming out of Techstars, and was asked to be an entrepreneur in residence for the class that Andrew was bringing Bloomfilter through. And so it was through that kind of happy circumstance that Andrew and I got to know each other, and ultimately we came to partner with one another.
That's really cool. I love that. So before this, you never met.
No, I'd never met at all.
Okay. So Andrew, what's your background?
Yeah, so I'm a tech. I'm from Cleveland. Eric's from Chicago. So I've been a tech entrepreneur in Cleveland for the last, we'll call it 9 years. Background in technology. It was really interesting. When it came to Techstars, I was potentially looking to raise money for a different company, and the director here, Neil, we had come up to cross paths through a venture capital firm here in Chicago. So when Bloomfilter became a reality, I called Neil up and said, "Hey, do you think this is a good fit for Techstars?" He's like, "Yeah, put the application in." So it was really serendipity that this all happened in the most interesting ways and how this all got connected.
Oh, that's really cool. I love it. So what made you decide then to go with Techstars in the first place? There's other accelerators. We're not going to name them.
It was actually the managing director. I really like Neil. Neil's a good friend of mine, and I think he has the right idea on how startups should be run and how businesses should be run. I was like, I want to work with this guy. I want to find a way to work with him. So I'm like, well, why don't I become an entrepreneur in his program? And that's kind of how the decision was made. One of our other co-founders, Chris, and I had talked about it in length. Like, is this something we want to do? Do we want to be venture backed and everything else? And we came away from having bootstrapped the business together, and we felt those challenges as well, not being as well capitalized as we are now, and decided, you know what, we don't want. I'd rather have the stresses of how to execute than the stresses of how are we going to make payroll next week. And that's going down the Techstars route is definitely a great way to make sure that you have the good basis of capitalization needed to build a business as ambitious as ours.
Yeah, it's true. So I want to talk about capital because that's one of the reasons that we started talking. It's something super exciting happening with you guys, and I want to hear more about the beginning to the end. So leave the good nugget, the dollar number to the end, please. How did you get started with asking for capital? How did that go? I'm sure you got a tons of no's, and walk me through that and where you're at now. End with that.
Sure. So I joined forces with Andrew. October 1st was my first day with the company. And what happened at demo day, when I saw the demonstration of Bloomfilter and I came to understand the power of the platform, what I realized, having had a little bit of a history in the process mining world, what I realized was that we had this opportunity to build a first of its kind platform, to build a process mining platform to transform the software development lifecycle. And when that clicked in my head, Andrew was driving back to Cleveland from Chicago with his team. And I called, and I think we talked for about 2 hours as I was like yelling at him. I was so excited. I was like, "No, you don't understand. This is such a big opportunity. This can be so incredible and so exciting." And I really haven't stopped thinking about that idea ever since the coin sort of dropped in my head. So again, I joined October 1st. One of the first things that we decided that we wanted to do was to put a substantial amount of capital in the business. As Andrew said, for us, we believe there's a huge and sort of ambitious opportunity around what we can build with this platform. And we knew we needed a capital structure that would ultimately support that. And so, great timing, right? We decided to start raising money October 1st of last year, right? As SaaS multiples are compressing, capital is becoming more challenging to access. And so, we started to go through that process. We started very much with the Techstars community. And our first real anchor investor, besides North Coast Ventures, was Hyde Park Angels, that had started tracking Bloomfilter through the Techstars process. That was part of how I got to know the company, as I'm also an investor with HPA. And so we knew they were very excited. And so they were our first real commitment into the fundraise. We then basically ran a fairly, I would say, standard fundraising process. When we got started, I think we said a best case scenario would be we thought we could raise 4 million of capital by the end of April, and that was what we thought was a best reasonable scenario. And then we started going through the process. We went through the fundraise. To your point, Andrea, we heard an awful lot of no's, but thankfully we heard enough yeses that we were able to continue to generate interest. And one of our favorite investors that we met early on in the process continued to be interested through the entire thing, a guy by the name of Mike Stubler at Magarac Venture Partners. And he was just fantastic to work with through the entire fundraise process. So, we went through the holidays. Everything dries up in the holidays. We got to a point where I think we started to get a little bit nervous, kind of looking around and saying, hey, it's like January 15th, and there's a lot of folks that really haven't called us back since after Thanksgiving. Is this going to work? Like, are we going to be able to pull this thing off? And thankfully, it was around that I think the momentum started to shift. We started to move from interest towards term sheets. Now, of course, as that was happening, we had the blow up of SVB that we're all very aware of. That created its own drama, its own challenge, its own sort of hiccup around everything. But we were very fortunate in that we had investors who reached out proactively and offered to bridge us because our money was at SVB. They offered to bridge us if we needed it. Thankfully, we didn't need it. And our core investors, like the core syndicate that we built around the round, never hesitated. They never, came back and asked us to renegotiate terms. They never said, well, I'm sorry, guys, things have changed. They're very strong believers in the business and in the team. They stuck with us through the entire, through the entire process, and thrilled to announce that, on April 20th, we were able to close a $7 million round of seed financing. So way above what we expected. Yeah. I mean, way above what we expected. We did it on a timeline that we thought was ambitious but doable, and thankfully it worked out. And we really do think that both the amount of capital and the quality of our investors gives us a fantastic opportunity to grow the business commensurate with our ambitions.
Oh, that's amazing. First of all, congratulations. That's a lot of hard work on you guys' part too, to even get to that. And then getting more than what you wanted. Hello. That's, I mean, you can't get better than that. Andrew, was that your first time raising money for a company?
Being on this side of the actual fundraising part. Luckily, I had Erik, who's a veteran at this, but I was always on the technical side, given my background on the CTO. So it was my first time as like co-CEO, CEO, being the one answering the questions, preparing data rooms. Luckily, our other co-founder, Blake, is really on the ball, very detail oriented, and was able to assist a lot with some of the other stuff that's just really difficult when you're both talking to investors, you got your day job of sales, marketing, company leadership, and then all that stuff. So we were my side, customer success and product. So having someone else that was able to help with a lot of those details, making sure that happened, like it was really a team effort from everybody to get this through. But very excited that we did, and I'm very excited about our investor group and everything we were able to accomplish.
Oh man, that's so cool. I love that. So I want to hear the difference. I want to get a little bit more into like mental stuff here. So Andrew, the first time you were actually the one that asking for money. Erik, you've been doing this for a while. So when the 7 million came through, like let's get mushy, let's get emotional. What was the feeling between first time Andrew, multiple times Erik? Like what did you guys think like when oh my God, we got $7 million?
I went to bed and I woke up and immediately logged into the bank account because I was like, oh, the money's still there.
I love that. It's still there.
No, it felt really good, but in another way, it amps the pressure up, right? Before it was just us, I'd be letting my team down, I'd be letting my family down if we don't make this thing work. But now we added another 27 odd people that we can let down when this thing doesn't work. So it really amps the pressure on, like, all right, now it's time to make even more phone calls, send even more emails, work even harder, and balancing that with like also you can't work yourself to death, right? Because this is just one milestone. The next milestone's a Series A, and then we want to go public. We want to take this thing to the moon, and you have to be along for the entire journey, and you can't break along the way. And so it's a balancing that, knowing that the stakes are even higher with yeah, but also you're a human being, and so you gotta walk this path, and it's a long one.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely a long game.
Yeah, I would echo that. I mean, I would say the mental and emotional state at the point where the round got done is just pure gratitude, relief, and exhaustion, right? I mean, it's like getting to the end of a marathon. It's all right, we're here. Like we've been able to do this thing that we've been working so hard on for the last 6 months, and that's just an amazing feeling, right? And for our investors to trust us with a large amount of money to say, let's go execute, let's make this vision a reality. I mean, it's something that I'm just unbelievably grateful for. The flip side of it, exactly to Andrew's point, for me, it's reminding myself to stop for a while and relax and enjoy the feeling of we just got to an accomplishment. That pressure's already ramping up. Like that all right, now we've got 10 more things. All right, now there's 10 more things to do. And what I know from having been through this journey a few times is that treadmill never ends. The pressure's only going to ramp up more. Like I think I told the team that week, like the pressure only goes in one direction. It only goes up once you've decided you're on the road that we're on. And so it's trying to remind myself, trying to remind my team, stop, enjoy, smell the roses, enjoy the journey. Like this is the fun part of it. We need to treasure it and we need to revel in it, for a little bit, recognizing that then there's a ton of hard work that's still ahead of us and a ton of pressure that comes with that.
Yeah, yeah. So since you wrote that book on mental health and entrepreneurship, are you then able to help Andrew and talk him down if he's checking his bank account every 5 minutes?
It goes both ways. So I'm trying to remind myself of all the lessons that I've taught myself and things that I've documented and say, all right, well, here's pattern recognition. Like you understand this stuff. We made the decision. We have a larger founding team than most, right? So we have 4 principal co-founders that we decided to join forces and go on this journey together. Any one of us could have been, and many of us have been the CEOs of other companies. And to a large extent, we decided to kind of put ego aside in order to have that group in a way that we think maximizes both our odds of success, but then also our ability to enjoy the journey as we go down it. And those things go hand in hand. And so, while at times I try to be the voice of reason in terms of helping the team out, we have plenty of hard times where Andrew's putting his arm around me and saying, it's cool, man. Like we're gonna, this is a tough day. We're gonna get through this day and then we've got the next day ahead. So, having that team, having that support network for us, I think is just unbelievably important and unbelievably valuable.
Yeah, and we have seen that a lot of the co-CEOs, they do better than the solo CEOs because they're lonely, right? They have no one to talk to. They're the only ones at the top. And it's just nice when you have other people that you can bounce ideas off and brainstorm together. So I love that you have that. 4 is a lot. Tell me about that. I'm interested about that. Like,
Well, it's not 4 CEOs, right? It's 4 co-founders.
okay.
So 2 CEOs, a chief operating officer, and a chief technology officer. Um, and yeah, I mean, Andrew, you're the one that put this band of this crew together here.
I'll say we're all experienced here, right? We've all had our successes, we've all had our failures. And the way that humbleness that life has given all of us allows us to work together, it is a lot. But I'll say, I think most founding teams are actually understaffed. Having been a CEO before, I remember thinking every day I'm letting the company down. Why? Well, our document management wasn't good. Our bank account wasn't well managed. It's like, because I've 100 things to do, and why everything's important. There's things that are more important. And now I don't feel that way because I'm like, no, he's got sales and marketing and fundraising. Blake has our operations, and I can focus on the customers and product and technology. And Chris has that technology piece even. So it's really nice to be able to know that everything's taken care of and it's done in a world-class way where, again, you can take those no-look passes and make it happen. And that when a week, 2 weeks from now, it's going to get done. It's going to get done right. And that you don't have to worry about it. I mean, that's a feeling, that's a sense of peace you cannot buy. And I'm glad to have it. It's the first time working and operating at this level that I've ever had in my career.
I look back on my time as a sole CEO and founder of Simple Relevance. And I just think, how the hell was I even trying to do it? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. We need this quality, this caliber, and this quantity of talent in order to go do what we want to do.
Yeah. So, Andrea, I heard you earlier say that you, when we go public, or the goal is to go public. Tell me more about the actual goal of Bloomfilter.
That is the actual goal. We're Midwestern, so we got a little bit of a chip on our shoulder, when we hear about Valley companies and everything else. And we think we can be a great story here in the Midwest, bring a high-tech company public and be able to show people that, hey, no, not only is the Midwest worth investing in, there's great talent here. There's tremendous opportunity here and that we can do it. And I think we can be the leaders and we can set the benchmark here of what's possible. And on top of that, I mean, most of us have had successes in our past. And so, the first $20 million offer you get, it's not really that interesting to the founding team here. Not that that's not a great deal and it can't be life changing money for people. But in our way, we want to hit that home run. And we're going to hit that home run. It's not really a matter of if, it's when. And we're going to work really hard to make that happen. And fortunately, we know what that takes. This isn't a guy out of high school saying he's going to build a $1 billion business. He's going to build the next Facebook. This is a bunch of serial entrepreneurs that have been through this journey at least once, if not multiple times, and knows what it's going to take to get there. And we're going into it eyes wide open, knowing that when we say that's what our goal is, we've put our flag, on this metaphorical hill, and we're going to take it. Right? And that's how we think about this.
Love that. Love that. So I want to hear a little bit more about your Techstars accelerator experience. So a lot of people that are listening are founders that are maybe on the fence and they're like, I don't know, do I want to join Techstars? Do I need to join an accelerator? Tell me a little bit about it, like what you learned, what it was like.
One of the things that some of the knowledge is common knowledge, but there's some of the stuff that's kind of arcane. Like, say this to investors, don't say this to investors, do this, don't do that. That I think you learn going through an accelerator that you can't really learn in business school. And business schools have gotten way better over the past even 5 years, 10 years on making entrepreneurship a thing. But I never got my MBA. I'm a master's in computer science. So a lot of the stuff of this is how you should format your forecasts, your pro formas, and all that was really helpful to Chris and I, being both technical. The other thing you learn is, other entrepreneurs and how to lean and build a support system that's critical. I mean, Erik's class in our time really hit home because I'd been through so much at previous businesses. And so building that support system early and having a network of people that are going through the same thing you are, right? Because, it can be very isolating when you're sitting there and you're getting 300 no's for every one yes. And, it's not just in fundraising, it's customers, it's everything up until you get product market fit. I mean, you get a lot of no's, like, you're too early, like, I don't know what's a value prop. You're still learning a lot. And so there's a lot of challenges in the early days, and having that support system is huge. I think that the third thing that you learn is demo day is a real pushing function to how much can we really accomplish in 3 months. And typically you don't think a lot, but like when you look at where this company was at the beginning and how much pressure and time, I mean, we made a diamond out of it, obviously. And so like it was really nice to have that forcing function of to push you a little bit harder than maybe you would have pushed yourself. And those weekly check-ins, like, oh, my ER is going to kill me this week because I didn't get an extra customer call in. Like, that kind of pressure isn't something you typically have. And I think it works wonders in helping build, companies, albeit it can be a little bit stressful for some people. I enjoyed my experience.
Yeah, Andrea, I'll only add to that. I get asked all the time to advise people about whether or not to join Techstars, and I almost always suggest that they do. And the thing that I try to help founders understand is for a percentage of your company that you're quote unquote giving up to join the program, what you get in return is not just the point in time of what happens over 12 weeks, but it is access to a community that I think creates value. For me, it's been the entirety of my career. And so one of the decision points I had when I took Simple Relevance through was very much not just around what am I getting for Simple Relevance, but what do I get as an entrepreneur who wants to make a career in and around the entrepreneurial ecosystem as an investor, as an operator in a variety of different roles. And, this is a great example of, if you told me 10 years ago that a big part of the value of me going through Techstars with Simple Relevance would be me co-founding another company 10 years later because it went through Techstars and that was how I met them, that would have been, a very bizarre story for me to have understood. And that's ultimately the way that it ended up working out. And so, 10 years on, I'm still getting tremendous value from the Techstars network.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's important because that's one thing that we do. We try to work with you. We have Techstars Universe and other kind of platforms, and we have FounderCon where we get together just to make sure like, hey, we're still here. We didn't go away just because you're done after 3 months. And then those networks and the connections that you make are invaluable. I love that. So I want to talk about as a CEO, as a co-founder, you're busy, obviously, right? You're just doing. How do you make time for your other things in your life? Family, friends, hobbies, other things like that. Are you able to do that, or are you 100% work right now?
I mean, from my side, I'm very intentional about starting my day at 7 and ending it around 5. Obviously, I'm in Chicago right now. I'm not in Cleveland with my family. So, I have time on the road and all that. But the big thing is just being intentional about getting your work done and not really messing around. So, I'm a very systematized person. I put, all my stuff to get done, and I get it done in a day. I think you have to be intentional about it, though. I mean, I have more work and so does Eric, for that matter. Like, we have so much work that you could fill 24 hours with it, and then you can fill the next 24 hours. And unironically, the kind of work that we do, the more sales calls and the more customer calls I do, the more calls I have to do because you create more work for yourself. And so you just have to be intentional, know that, hey, you did the right thing, set personal KPIs and say, I know if I do this, I've done enough, and make sure you keep yourself accountable to it. And luckily, I'm surrounded with accountability from my co-founders, which is another great thing. And we make sure we prioritize people first. It's one of our values, and we're people too. We have to make sure that, again, I mentioned it's yes, we just got done running a marathon, but there's the next marathon, and there's the marathon after that, and making sure that we stay as mentally healthy as we can through the entire process. And that means taking downtime, spending time with your family, spending time on the things that are important, getting your hobbies and all that stuff. It's critical. If you don't do it, I mean, you're making short-term gains for long-term sacrifice. And this is a long game, right? It's who survives the longest. And if you're not able to make it in 3-4 years when you burn out, the company's going to suffer far more then than it would have done if you had just taken the time, throughout.
One of the biggest mistakes that I've made in previous iterations through the journey was putting off everything else with this idea that I'm fixating, I'm going to hustle harder, I'm going to do more faster. Like, I'm going to put off everything else in my life with a single-minded focus on my company in a way that is unhealthy and ultimately drives to counterproductive results. There's a lot of research around that. I talk about this concept a lot in my book. And it's a place where I'm trying very hard to hold myself accountable, to say, all right, I'm going to disconnect. I am going to be very present with my family. I've got 2 young daughters. I'm not willing to sacrifice watching them grow up just for Bloomfilter. Like, Bloomfilter is going to take me away from them sometimes. That's fine. That's part of, what I signed up for. But I'm not going to allow my personhood and my personal identity to become completely commingled with my role as co-founder and co-CEO of the company. And so I have the professional side and the professional work that I put in. And then there's the time that I go home and I say, okay, great. Like, I'll pick up my phone if Andrew calls me and there's an emergency. But otherwise, I'm going to be focused on my family. I'm going to be focused on my friends. I'm going to be focused on, some philanthropic and nonprofit stuff that I think is very important. I am not a believer in putting life on hold, in order to be an entrepreneur or in order to build a company.
Yeah, that's smart. I want to ask about your book. So you've actually climbed Mount Everest, right?
I have, yes.
That's crazy. I can't even hike like 40 minutes, like a little mountain behind my house over here. So tell us a little bit about the book. I know this is about Techstars and Bloomfilter, but people are interested. Tell us about the book a little bit, what it is, and why you wrote it.
Yeah, so I had a very challenging experience post Techstars with Simple Relevance. We ultimately ended up getting to an exit there, but it was not a very successful exit. We didn't return capital to investors. And as I was going through that process, I would say from about Techstars through the exit, and then about a year after I exited the company, I ended up in some very dark and very kind of challenged mental places personally. I was probably drinking too much. There was stuff going on. I had too many substances. I wasn't sleeping very well. There were points where I didn't realize how dark of a hole I was in, but there were points where I was fantasizing about suicide without even realizing that psychologically I was in a very broken state. And it took me a long time to sort of understand how I had come to that place. I thought it was unique to me. Well, afterwards, as I started to sort of research and dig into this and sort of, spend a lot of time and energy on this, I found some research by Dr. Michael Freeman and other folks that showed that entrepreneurs have 3 times the rate of addiction and twice the rate of suicidality of the general population. And I've invested in a lot of entrepreneurs. I've seen a lot of this anecdotally and firsthand. I've known entrepreneurs that end up in sort of fugue states where they can't even remember their own name as they're trying to negotiate deals. And ultimately, I kept talking to entrepreneurs and I kept wanting to find ways to help them and wanting to share my experience, help them understand that it's not them. They don't need to feel alone with this. So I started working on different drafts of this book that I knew I wanted to write. And then concurrent with that, I ended up going and I'd had this kind of 10-year goal to go climb Mount Everest. And so I ended up being able to take the time to go climb Mount Everest. What I realized as I was climbing Mount Everest was my guides were constantly telling me, instead of go do more faster, they were telling me stop, wait, rest, recover, be ready to put in the effort when you need to, but don't burn it all out just on sort of needless activity. And so what I realized as I was going through that process was there's a lot of these lessons that I sort of learned, and there's a lot of concepts around mental resilience that I felt like needed to be shared with entrepreneurs that were not part of our lore and our culture. Brad Feld has obviously done a lot to help in this topic, but there's vanishingly few kind of thought leaders who are out there, talking to entrepreneurs around these challenges. And so that led to a passion project that I had, which ultimately led to writing and then publishing a book during the pandemic called Scale Your Everest, which talks a lot about sort of practical as well as philosophical lessons for entrepreneurs to understand this is going to be, a multi-year journey. Andrew and I are probably stuck with each other for 7, 8, 9, 10 years at minimum, right? And I plan to be partnering with him to run Bloomfilter for a long, long time in the future. Well, I want to make sure the most important asset that the company has is the minds of the co-founding team and those of us that are building it. We want to make sure that we're operating as well as we can, as optimally as we can, that we're resilient to the challenges and the ups and downs in the journey, because the research is pretty unequivocal in showing that the better we can position ourselves for that, the more likely the better outcomes we'll have for the company.
Yeah, yeah. I love the little nuggets that the two of you are dropping about what is, what makes an entrepreneur better. We talked a lot about mental health. I want to also talk again about capital, and just because you guys have gotten that 7 million, which is amazing. Andrew, what advice do you have for the entrepreneurs that are listening, that are about to start asking and trying to get their first funding in? Any advice you can give them?
Oh, I have lots of advice.
How long you got?
So my previous company was bootstrapped, and I learned a lot through that because you really go payroll to payroll, and like there were times when we had 3 months of payroll in the bank, and there was times when we didn't have payroll in the bank, and we're like, boy, I hope they pay their invoice on time, and you learn what invoice factoring is, and all those fun things that I don't think anyone should ever have to learn what that is. But the thing was you learn how to manage the money frugally. It's really easy to look at 7 million and say, boy, that's a lot of money. But then you look at how much lawyers cost, how much accountants cost, how much all this cost, and you realize it's not that much at the end of the day. And you have to manage not every dollar, don't be penny wise, pound foolish, but you have to know, hey, to hit our goals, we need this much. But guess what? Things happen. You get sick. You can't work for a month. Your chief sales guy quits. Whatever, right? So it's not just you need 12 months at your goal. You need 14. You need 18 months, right? I always say plan for 50% more than you think it's going to take, because everything takes longer than you think. And I'm a pretty impatient person, so that kind of sucks. That fact sucks. But at the end of the day, plan for more and be conservative. If you miss a month by a plan, cut your budget elsewhere. Don't just think, oh, we missed this month, it'll be fine, don't worry about it. No, be hyper vigilant. We review our books as a team every month. We make sure that if we set a plan that we're going to spend X amount, that we spend X amount, and if we go over, we talk about that. Because it's so important that not only do we get to our goals, that we plan that we might not when we expect to, right? The economy, right? We might have another failed bank on our hands. We did have a failed bank on our hands. We never expected that. Before that, my previous business, If you told me I was going to wake up one day, the entire economy was going to shut down, I'd be like, you're making stuff up. But the pandemic happened, right? And we were able to navigate through that because we were very conservative and we were very conscious in how we spent the money that we did raise. And because of that, we were able to navigate. And I think that's the biggest thing is just don't take for granted that you have this money now. Money isn't around every time, right? We went from the frothiest market in maybe history to what we have today, right? There's no guarantee it ever returns to that. There's no guarantee that by the time we get to a year that we're able to raise a Series A, right? We don't know what the economic conditions are going to be in a year. So plan for today, make sure you have the runway, and make sure that you have a plan in place that you're able to execute against that helps you get to your goals.
Love it, love it. Okay, I want to continue. We are way over time. I'm going to ask one last question, and this one's to Erik. I would also like another. I'm needy and greedy right now with these nuggets of advice because you guys are so good at this. What else can you give advice? Not on capital, not on mental health. Give me one more nugget of advice for entrepreneurs that are listening right now.
Understand clearly and be able to articulate your position in the market, the value you're bringing, how it's differentiated. And this is so cliche, like people say this, but candidly, the difference between Bloomfilter limping through and getting a small amount of money, or the difference in our company, like there's been a massive difference that has come when we just realized that we needed to embrace this concept of process mining as a new category, a category that we could lead. And like, we didn't change the product one iota. We didn't change the messaging hardly but a few words. But that one little shift made everything click when it related to raising capital, finding great employees, finding great advisors, getting customers excited. It was just like the tiniest shift in how we talked about what we did. And so like understanding that if when you're describing your company, the people that are listening to you talk are not having that aha moment, if they're not leaning in, there's probably something that you're missing in terms of how you're articulating. It may not be that your vision's wrong at all. It may not be that the product needs to change a bit. But oftentimes the way that we describe it, the way that we communicate that value is so important. And we oftentimes still miss that, even as we're, even as we're working on it, I guess.
Yeah. How do you know? I mean, you said when people aren't leaning in, but how do you know? Is it mostly like when you were asking for capital and when you were talking to new clients? Like, at what point were you like, okay, this is not 100% hitting the mark. I need to optimize this?
So before Erik joined, we really struggled in getting people to understand what we did, right? Even Erik struggled to understand what we did because we knew what we did. We did exactly what I told you we did at the beginning of the call, but that sounded really good. You understood right away what we did. Before, no one really understood, and they're like, "You're really excited about this. You're going to help me do software development. Boy, I really struggle with that. You know what? I don't even know what you do. I'm willing to give it a chance." And it was kind of like, okay, but they didn't understand our value prop. And when they don't understand your value prop, there's a bunch of downstream issues that we don't have time to get into there. Least of all, actually closing the deal or raising money or anything else. When we switched to process mining, when we made it obvious what we did, it's very much like, oh, you know what, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I have a lot of process issues in my software development, and it clicks. It's everything gets easier. Fundraising, customers, employees, everybody's like, oh, I can get behind that. And that's everyone has that problem. But if you can't clearly articulate business problem, like what are you solving? People, they might buy your thing because they like you or they like what you're doing, but it's gonna be really hard for you to get the market to do anything more than just being, as Erik said, limping along, getting one or two deals versus what we're doing now, which is robust pipeline, robust funding, and everything else.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. I think that's so hard for a lot of people to do because you're in the weeds, and you know what you're doing, but other people, they just still don't understand. And especially when you start going to something that's a little bit more technical or a little bit more complicated. So I'm glad that you guys figured that out and you guys.
Andrea, if you don't mind me interrupting real quick. is we
Yeah.
tend to externalize when people don't get it and we blame them. They don't get it because they're dumb. They don't get it because they're biased. They just don't like me because I have red hair or whatever. We tend to externalize when we don't have the message nailed. The natural human thing to do is to blame the audience for not getting it. And we've taken a very different approach, which is if the audience isn't getting it, we need to change it. And it was through that, I think, fairly candid self reflection that we ultimately ended up shifting a little bit, just a few words of the narrative, and it really allowed everything else to click into place.
Ah, amazing, amazing. I can't wait to see what you guys do next. I'm going to have you on again. Thank you so much for your time, and I appreciate everything that you have given the entrepreneur in today's series. I love the advice, and we might need to ask a little bit more in the future.
Thank you so much. And to anybody who's listening, if you're interested in improving your process, your software development process, please check out the bloomfilter.com. We'd appreciate it.